So welcome back. We're going to go on with that last point that Steve Weinberg raised before he left, essentially, which is the faith-religion issue. Actually, while this is up, just before I forget, this is a painting by Anselm Kiefer. That's by William Blake. But the other one is called Sternenfall, which means starfall, and I've loved this painting for a long time. Anselm Kiefer is a German artist, absolutely brilliant German artist, who was born in 1945 and has wrestled with these issues of heaven and faith and so on. He was in a monastery for a time, and he wrestles with this sort of issues of Nazism and the Holocaust and so on. And I looked at that painting and I thought, well, God, you know, at some point when we get to the morality issue, I mean, here we have. This puts me in mind of Kant, you know, the starry heavens above me, the moral law within me. And so I got in touch with the curator of an exhibition where this painting was showing, and he said, well, that's funny. He said, that's exactly what was in Kiefer's mind. He'd been thinking of that. And that's actually a self-portrait. That's Anselm Kiefer lying on the ground, pondering these enormous issues. And I wrote to him and asked him if we could use this as one of the defining images for this thing, and he said he was very happy to do it. So I just thought I would mention that. We'll go on with the issue that Steve set up for us. We'll be going to Joan Roughgarden. Just before we do that, I just want to have Terry Sanofsky, who's the chair of the advisory board for the Science Network and director of the Computational Neurobiology Lab here, and a Howard Hughes medical investigator and a professor of just about everything under the sun, to say a few words about Francis Crick.
Especially those who have visitors who have traveled some distance, on behalf of the Crick-Jacobs Center for Theoretical and Computational Biology, which I direct here at the Salk Institute. Could I have the slide? Slide. Francis, if he were here, would have much to add to our discussion. He was, as many of you know, a devout atheist, which is not to say a militant atheist. He probably did more than anybody I know to demystify the nature of life and the nature of consciousness. In fact, he was working on that problem on his very last day here on Earth. And I think it would be appropriate to quote from his last book, entitled The Astonishing Hypothesis, which, as you know, was the hypothesis that everything that we think and that we feel is a product of our brain, which is something that is obvious to some neuroscientists, but not so obvious to most of the people here on this planet, as we heard earlier. And this excerpt is taken from the last chapter, entitled Dr. Crick's Sunday Morning Sermon, which is perhaps appropriate for today. And this is toward the very end, as he's summing up. General ideas, especially moral ones, impressed on us at an early age, often become deeply embedded in our brains. It can be very difficult to change them. This may help to explain why religious beliefs persist from generation to generation. But how did such ideas originate in the first place? And why do they so often turn out to be incorrect? The very nature of our brains evolved to guess the most plausible interpretation of the limited evidence available, makes it almost inevitable that without the discipline of scientific research, we shall often jump to the wrong conclusions, especially about rather abstract matters. Amen.
So, Joan, said a godly voice from across the room, would you like to join us and say your piece? Joan Roughgarden, let me just make one apology first of all. In the list of recommended reading at the back, There is a significant omission, which is it just fell off in the typing process, which is Joan's book, which is outside in the lobby with the UCSD bookstore. The fact that it is not here does not mean it is not recommended reading. It is recommended reading. And so Joan will follow up on the point that Steven Weinberg started. She's professor in the Department of Biological Sciences in Stanford. And her current book is the Darwin book, Evolution and Christian Faith. But the one before that, which I highly recommend, is called Evolution's Rainbow, Diversity, Gender and Sexuality, which is a complete eye-opener. So, Joan Roughgarden.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak. And in the spirit of preparing a conversation, what I'd like to do is react and extend some of the points that were raised earlier. First of all, with respect to where I'm coming from, as was just mentioned, my previous book, the one before the most recent one, was called Evolution's Rainbow, and about gender and sexuality and nature and also in people. And one of the principal conclusions of that is that one of the branches of Darwin's writings, the branch that pertains to sex roles, called sexual selection theory, I think have concluded is entirely incorrect and on the wrong track. And so it provides us with, apart from the truth of that or not, it provides us with an interesting test case of the willingness of the scientific community to see someone challenged, whom we hold at least in the status of a hero and possibly in the status of a prophet. Now, the most recent book that I've done, called Evolution and Christian Faith, is quite a bit different. It's a very small book, and it's motivated specifically by the need to have some material for the people whom I envision and know personally as people of faith, and who are wondering what evolution is actually about. So in a sense, what I'm going to be doing is putting some different perspectives on the table. If you consider what went before as the opening of a chess game in which a lot of pawns were put out on the table and some knights, then what I'm going to begin is to put some pawns on the table together with some bishops. But unlike a real chess game, both sides can actually talk to one another. So it need not end in a victory or a draw, but it actually could end in a bargained solution. Now, and I should say also by way of where I'm coming from, my parents were missionaries, and I grew up in Indonesia and the Philippines in the Episcopal Church tradition. And I left the church. I didn't quit the church or anything. I just sort of drifted away for many, many years until about 10 years ago when I had some very serious personal issues I was dealing with and returned to church at that time. So it's over the last 10 years that I've been part of a religious community, and so therefore have a sense of what the questions are that people are asking. And what was needed was a succinct statement of what evolution was, and also a friendly statement of what evolution was. And so I employed a very strong fact theory distinction and simply stipulated that the main facts of evolution are two, namely that all of life belongs to a common family tree, and secondly that biological species change through time in contradistinction to physical species. And I just simply stipulate those. And that also leads me to say that the book that I've just written is not a secular book, and it's not a book about general science. It's actually a religious book, and it's being shelved in the religious sections of bookstores. And then the theory of evolution, so I'm going to say drawing a strong fact theory distinction here. Theory of evolution is what explains the facts. And as you all know, the elements of basic Darwinian theory as we understand it today are that there is variation generated